At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name's Chikondi. Let's begin. High Director Salvatore Tarkins had been promised the agonized cries of the putrid species called Homo sapiens. He expected the wet, choking gasps of respiratory failure his people promised. His top xenobiologists guaranteed a symphony of torment. Instead, he heard singing, loud, off-key, disturbingly joyous. "What?" he said, spittle flying from his mouth with each enraged syllable. "Is that grotesque noise?" Aboard the Axron flagship, the Vigilant Harmony, 39 decorated officers found sudden fascination with the floor panels. The main view screen showed a live feed from the surface of the planet designated Sol 3. It showed what once was downtown Brisbane, Australia, before the carefully planned distribution of VX9, the ultimate lethal toxin, the culmination of 4 decades of Axron military science. Yet the scene resembled less of an extinction event and more a sloppy street festival. A human soldier, stripped to his combat trousers and boots, was chugging the glowing green contents of a sleek black Axrian toxin canister. His squad mates cheered him on, banging empty canisters like drums. In the background, someone ingeniously constructed a multi-person beverage delivery system. A small data overlay helpfully identified it as a beer bong from spent artillery shells and a looted storm drain pipe, pouring several canisters of VX9 into the funnel. "Sir," ventured Communications Officer Pratchett, "our radio analysis identifies the song as Sweet Caroline." The mass of humans on the screen reached the song's chorus. "Bum, bum, bum," they screamed in chaotic unison, firing their projectile weapons into the air for punctuation. The barrage of gunfire mixed with the shouting, a sound of joyous bedlam. Salvatore's left primary eye twitched. It had twitched for the past 6 hours, ever since they blanketed 19 of Earth's major population centers with millions of self-refrigerating VX9 canisters, disguised as a diplomatic gesture. The twitch now developed its own subsidiary twitch, a tiny spasmodic moon that orbited a planet of humiliated rage. "Lenny!" someone drunkenly screeched from the screen. "Where's Lenny, my boy?" The man fell down a flight of stairs. He apparently didn't have the ambition to continue his search for Lenny, as he just laid his head back and went to sleep. "And the reports from the other 18 cities?" Salvatore growled, his gaze fixed on the screen. The man drooled in his sleep, dreaming of Lenny. Pratchett winced. "Substantially the same, Your Eminence. Widespread property damage, chaotic gatherings, and vigorous vocal performances." One of the officers couldn't help himself. "That's not the only thing they're vigorous about," he muttered. Salvatore pointed at the offending officer. "Airlock! Now!" "What? But I... Send him to the airlock!" Salvatore screeched, and the officer was dragged away. "So the entire species is having a sing-along," Salvatore stated, his voice dangerously flat. "How wonderful for them! Get me Dr. Vashon." The command was quiet, a quiet that precedes very loud, very permanent career changes for those nearby. The trembling xenobiologist materialized moments later. Sheer terror practically teleported him onto the bridge. His white lab coat still smoked from a recent and predictable lab fire he failed to plan for. He glanced from Salvatore's rigid posture to the anarchic view screen, and then to the nearest emergency exit hatch. "Your Eminence! Grand High Director! I can explain!" "Can you?" Salvatore turned slowly, his movements as deliberate and menacing as a predator that sized up a disappointing meal. "Can you explain why the dominant species of this mudball is alive?" On the screen, a squad of human marines set up a net made of looted Christmas lights. They played a spirited, if appallingly clumsy game of volleyball with a full, unactivated Axron toxin canister. Green light pulsed inside it every time one of them spiked it, followed by whoops of drunken joy. "They're dying!" Vashon squeaked, his voice a frantic piccolo of desperation. They are! Just slower than projected, and with significantly more uncoordinated expressive flailing. Expressive flailing? The words left Salvatore's mouth like chips of ice. Well, sir, our analysis suggests that when a human metabolizes a Class 9 acetylcholinesterase inhibiting neurotoxin, consumed orally, into complex ethanol analogs, certain higher motor functions become uninhibited. Salvatore held up one claw. Dr. Vashon's mouth snapped shut, hard enough to chip a fang. Are you telling me, Salvatore said, his voice achieving a low frequency that made nearby glassware nervous, that our ultimate weapon, our species-ending super toxin, the liquid compound that took 4 decades, bankrupted 3 star systems, and on which my entire political future with the Council rests, is just getting them drunk? Vashon's middle eye, the one responsible for perceiving professional danger, began to twitch in perfect sync with Salvatore's. Technically, Your Eminence, the process is far more complex than simple intoxication. The metabolic pathway creates a flood of euphoric neurotransmitters and it's getting them drunk? A bead of terrified sweat rolled down Vashon's forehead and sizzled on his hot lab coat. Yes, sir. Essentially. The silence that followed could have frozen helium, a dense, heavy thing broken only by the distant, tinny sound of humans on the viewscreen who attempted a conga line through the mangled bowels of a shopping mall. They wore empty toxin canisters as festive little hats. Gods! Salvatore said, clicking his claws together. Airlock for this one, now! His theories failed to produce results. Let us see how they hold up in a vacuum. Wait! Vashon shrieked as 2 hulking guards seized his arms. Your Eminence, you fail to grasp the situation! No species in the Galactic Codex should metabolize liquid nerve agents into party fuel! Their livers basically reverse engineer death into dopamine! The process defies all known biology, an affront to life itself! And yet, Salvatore gestured with a lazy claw at the screen, where a human now attempted to ride a mechanical bull, spurred on by a cheering crowd. The human threw up from the spinning and ragdolled into the pit. Gods, bring me our next competent xenobiologist! As Dr. Vashon's protests about the sanctity of toxicology faded down the corridor, a younger Axran stepped forward from the knot of petrified science officers. Where Vashon was all nervous energy and flop sweat, this one moved with the measured grace of someone who learned early in life that panic was just inefficiency with extra steps. His uniform was immaculate. Dr. Sheldon Kahn, Your Eminence, he said, his voice calm and clear. Xenobiology and behavioral sciences. Salvatore studied him. Young, composed, a calm that suggested either supreme confidence or a total blissful disconnect from reality. In their current situation, both were equally valuable. Can you kill them? Salvatore asked, the question blunt as a hammer. Sheldon glanced at the viewscreen. A human commander, likely a high-ranking officer, used the shattered husk of an Axran sensor probe as a serving bowl, filled to the brim with the glowing green toxin. He ladled it into cups while giving a very emotional, very loud speech about brotherhood and the proper application of explosive ordnance. Of course, Your Eminence. Every living creature has a poison. I want a body count that includes every last one of them, Doctor. I have no need for a dissertation. We are here to dominate and rule one of the galaxy's most predatory species, not rule a clown show. Of course. Sheldon's expression remained fixed, but his pupils dilated for a fraction of a second, a predator's reflex at the sight of new data. A need for that data. The Axran beat curiosity out of their young in primary education in favor of rigid adherence to logic. Though, if I may suggest, sir, understanding why they are alive might be the key to correcting that oversight in a more permanent fashion. Salvatore's eye twitched contemplatively. On one hand, he wanted to add another scientist to the airlock's daily tally. On the other, his invasion was turning into an intergalactic kegger, and someone had to figure out how to make these infuriatingly resilient primates stop being so aggressively human.
"Fine," he said, finally, the words grinding out. "Come back with a solution, a weapon that works, or your return is unwelcome."
Sheldon bowed, a sharp, clean movement.
"Understood, Your Eminence."
As he turned to leave, Salvatore called after him.
"Doctor, one more thing. Should you fail, I will ensure your constituent molecules are scattered across 6 different star systems."
Sheldon paused at the doorway.
"How thorough of you, sir."
Salvatore could detect no sarcasm. He decided he cared little. He had bigger problems. On the view screen, the humans moved on from Sweet Caroline. They now played something that sounded like a dubstep remix of their planetary anthem, performed entirely on stolen Axon communication equipment. The performance produced a sound akin to a dying star fed through a wood chipper. His eye twitched harder. The day promised to be long. The drop shuttle, named the Empirical Truth, with typical Axon lack of imagination, touched down in what was once Cairns, Australia, before the VX-9 distribution. Now it was Cairns, but with 30% more property damage and 400% more public indecency. Sheldon stepped out onto the cracked pavement as the Earth's afternoon sun beat down. He adjusted his biosuit's filters to maximum and activated his official recorder.
"Personal log, Dr. Sheldon Kahn. I have landed at the designated insertion point. Initial observations. The human settlement shows extensive damage consistent with both our military engagement and recreational demolition. The ground is littered with discarded VX-9 canisters. Air quality analysis suggests high concentrations of ethanol and related complex organic compounds, likely from spillage and exhalation. Ambient noise levels exceed recommended safe."
A glass bottle, still trailing foam, sailed past his helmet with a whistle. It shattered against a nearby wall and left behind a wet smear and what appeared to be someone's phone number, written in bright red lipstick.
"Oi, sorry, mate."
A human stumbled into view from behind a barricade of overturned vending machines. He wore the tattered remnants of a military uniform. His face was flushed, his eyes bright with a chemical enhancement Sheldon was here to study.
"Thought you were my lieutenant. He owes me $20 and a rematch at Flip Cup."
Sheldon blinked as his suit's internal translator worked furiously to parse the slang.
"I am your lieutenant's replacement."
The human squinted at him and swayed slightly.
"Nah, you're right. You're way too sober. And too..."
He gestured vaguely at Sheldon's tall, slender, and distinctly non-human features.
"Purple? You actually purple, or is that VX talking?"
"I am, in fact, a shade of mauve."
"Fails to matter. Point is, you look like you need a drink."
The human thrust a canister of VX-9 into Sheldon's multi-jointed hands. The canister felt cool to the touch and smelled faintly of ozone and artificial fruit punch.
"First rule of the apocalypse, pal. Solitary drinking is just sad."
Before Sheldon could formulate a logical response, the human wandered off to stare at the phone number written in red lipstick. Sheldon looked down at the canister. He carefully secured the canister in his specimen case and moved deeper into the city, his every step a data point in a rapidly collapsing hypothesis. In a park, civilians and military personnel organized what appeared to be a combination music festival and group therapy session. A corporal with tears on his face ugly cried into a sergeant's shoulder while he simultaneously attempted to play a harmonica. The sound was mournful, terrible, and utterly heartfelt. Near a partially collapsed shopping mall, 2 humans had an intense philosophical debate about the nature of reality while they shared a traffic cone full of the glowing liquid.
"Like,"
one of them said, gesturing wildly with a half-empty canister and nearly overbalanced.
"what if we all are just like code, man? And what if the aliens are trying to run a delete command on us, but our file is corrupted and we're just corrupting their whole system with our refusal to die properly?
Bro, the other replied, his voice heavy with profound, chemically induced solemnity. That's beautiful. You're beautiful. This whole damn invasion is beautiful. But that idea is absolutely stupid, brother. Oh, I love you, man. I love you too, man. They hugged, a long, clumsy, heartfelt embrace that lasted for a full 43 seconds. Sheldon counted. He documented everything, but a strange, illogical question nagged at the edges of his consciousness. These humans survived the toxin. They took something designed with cold, calculated rigor to end them and turned it into what? Connection? Catharsis? It was not just disheveled anarchy these botched evolutionary experiments performed. They were bonding. A burst of laughter drew his attention to a makeshift medical station in the shell of a bombed-out pharmacy. A field medic, moderately intoxicated herself, patched up minor injuries.
Hold still, Private,
She said to a young soldier with a nasty gash on his forehead.
This is gonna sting, but probably less than your dignity will sting tomorrow morning.
The joke's on you, Doc! The private grinned and winced as she applied antiseptic. I lost my dignity 3 days ago when I tried to fistfight a streetlight.
Who won?
She asked, her hands steady. A streetlight, by technical knockout. I headbutted it, but I scheduled a rematch for midnight. They both laughed, a raw, genuine sound, and Sheldon found himself documenting the words and the tone. Their humor wrapped around their pain and confusion like armor made of gossamer. The armor seemed fragile, but it deflected the immediate hurt, while it remained fragile enough to let the healing get through. His contemplation ended when a firm hand clapped him on the shoulder.
Hey there, tall, dark, and purple. You lost?
Sheldon turned to find a human soldier who studied him with bloodshot but unnervingly sharp eyes. He looked to be in his mid-30s by human standards, with a face that collected scars the way most people collected regrets. His uniform identified him as Private E. Ward.
I am observing,
Sheldon said carefully, his suit's external speaker modulating his voice. Ward snorted, a sound of amused disbelief.
That's a fancy way of saying you're lost. Care to share a drink with me? Can't have visitors think we're bad hosts just because there's an apocalypse on.
I have no need for a guide.
And I offered you a drink, a completely different thing. What's your name, anyway?
Dr. Sheldon.
Ward walked away without a response, his stride confident despite a slight weave. After a moment's logical hesitation, Sheldon followed. His mission parameters were frustratingly vague about what to do when the friendly, extroverted subjects he was supposed to study for extermination decided to adopt him.
First stop on our magical misery tour,
Ward announced and gestured grandly at a burning electronics store where people had fashioned a karaoke station powered by a sputtering generator.
A new national monument to bad decisions and even worse singing. It's Corporal Jackie up there who murders Bohemian Rhapsody. She's been at it for 3 hours. We think she's working through some stuff.
Indeed, Corporal Jackie was deep into an emotional, off-key rendition that involved more crying than actual singing. The crowd of soldiers and civilians below swayed along supportively, lighters and phone flashlights held aloft. The lights created a sea of tiny, flickering stars in the smoky twilight.
Observation. She appears to experience significant emotional distress,
Sheldon noted as his recorder captured the scene.
Yeah, no kidding. The squad got hit hard in the first wave.
Ward's voice dropped the joking tone for a moment and became flat and hard.
The VX. It helps her feel it without drowning in it, you know? The first sip, everyone thought they were dying. Spasms, choking, the works. Horrific. Then the shaking turned to shivering, and the shivering turned to laughing, and someone put on some music. Some folks' livers couldn't make the switch, though. Some folks just died.
He paused and raised an imaginary glass.
So we sing for them.
Ward's smile got somber.
Sometimes we remember the good times.
Sheldon processed this new information. Casualties, a variable trait. The human resilience was a matter of majority, not totality. This made it statistically fascinating and somehow more profound.
In my culture, he said slowly, grief is processed privately, without public display.
Sounds lonely, Ward replied simply.
It's logical.
Ward grinned, but the expression was a brittle thing that left his eyes weary and sad. Yeah, well, we tried logic. Turns out logic pairs terribly with tragedy. So, you recording all this for something?
Academic purposes.
Right, academic. Ward studied him with those two sharp eyes again. You know, you remind me of my buddy Harper. He always observed too. He took notes on the rest of us idiots like we were some kind of ongoing experiment.
Was?
Sheldon picked up on the past tense immediately. He was in the first wave. Direct hit from one of the orbital strikes. Ward took a long pull from a battered metal flask. He would have loved this shit. He probably would have given us a 2-hour lecture on the sociological implications of weaponized intoxication while he did keg stands. They walked in silence for a moment as Jackie's karaoke faded behind them. They passed a group of civilians who turned a destroyed Axron patrol unit into a jungle gym for their children. The kids climbed all over the alien metal while their parents sat nearby, canisters in hand, and watched with the kind of exhausted vigilance that came from surviving the unsurvivable. Right, Ward said suddenly, his voice bright with the forced cheer of someone who deliberately changed a painful subject. Next stop, the world's worst distillery. He led Sheldon to what was once a high school chemistry lab. Now, several enterprising humans set up what could generously be called a still, and more accurately be described as an imminent fire hazard. They siphoned the liquid from discarded Axron canisters and attempted to distill it.
We're trying to boil the crazy out of the alien death juice,
One of them, a woman with safety goggles on her forehead, explained earnestly.
Isolate the euphoric compounds from the stuff that makes your eyeballs sweat. It's about cracking the molecular bonds,
Another added and poured in a beaker of something that made the mixture turn an alarming shade of fluorescent green.
If we can just get the proof high enough.
The still exploded. A wet, concussive pop, followed by a dense cloud of green steam that smelled like pine needles and poor choices. Everyone within a 3-meter radius was suddenly, intensely, and hilariously intoxicated.
Successful test!
Someone yelled from the floor, giggling. Mark it down, another agreed, who tried to write notes on a whiteboard, but mostly just drew happy, squiggly lines. Version 31, perhaps too successful. Ward laughed and helped one of the fallen chemists to a sitting position. Gotta admire the scientific method. If at first you don't succeed, add more alcohol and try again.
This is your species' approach to science?
Sheldon asked, genuinely perplexed by the blatant disregard for safety procedures. Mad science, maybe. But hey, that's how we got to the moon. A bunch of crazy humans in a room looked at a goal that defied reason and said, I bet we can make that happen if we're drunk enough to ignore the math.
You journeyed to your moon sober,
Sheldon corrected automatically. Only officially, Ward shot back with a wink. The impromptu tour continued. Ward played the role of Virgil, who led Dante through the bizarre, vibrant circles of the human apocalypse. Every stop revealed new facets of his species' response to catastrophe, the sublime and the ridiculous tangled together like lovers who couldn't agree on who led the dance. As the long day wore into a dusky, smoke-hazed evening, Sheldon found his clinical distance erode like a shoreline in a storm. These humans were complicated, messy, illogical, and alive in a way that made the rigid, orderly Axron look like clockwork automata in comparison. The sky turned the color of a day-old bruise when Ward finally stopped outside a small beachside bar that had somehow survived the invasion mostly intact. A flickering neon sign read, "The Last Drop," with someone's fresh graffiti scrawled underneath, "Until the next one."
Final stop on the tour, Ward announced. Welcome to the worst bar at the end of the world. In here, you drink, you process, and you wake up tomorrow slightly less human than you were today.
That sounds counterproductive.
Yeah. Ward's grin was genuine this time, crinkling the corners of his tired eyes.
Want to try it?
Inside the bar, humans in various states of military and civilian dress crowded around rough wooden tables and told stories that grew wilder and more heroic with each round. A jukebox in the corner played a chaotic mix of ancient Earth classics and what might have been Axran communication static remixed with a heavy bass beat. Ward bellied up to the bar and ordered 2 drinks. He slid one across the worn wood to Sheldon.
Our special, distill it from the chemistry lab. A splash of rum we found in a shipwreck, and a squeeze of whatever citrus wasn't nailed down when the looting started.
Sheldon stared at the glass. It contained a liquid that was an electric, vibrant blue, and it smoked slightly.
I should refrain,
He stated, a simple fact.
My species has no biological context for these compounds. The effects are unpredictable.
Of course you should. It'll probably kill a delicate purple flower like you. Or worse.
Ward's eyes twinkled.
It might make you feel something.
He raised his own glass. Ward's expression grew distant. The humor faded.
Harper used to say that humans were just the universe's way of asking the question, what if we tried it anyway? Guess your people's answer to that was, let's poison them all and find out.
Sheldon wondered at the hospitality of this human. The apocalypse had started, and in this intoxicated moment of calm, Ward and many other humans chose to enjoy their lost moments rather than fight or witness any more death. Around them, the bar hummed with the noise of human survival. Laughter and tears and furious arguments about sports teams that might exist tomorrow. In one corner, someone taught a group of Marines how to juggle empty canisters. In another, someone was passed out on a table, and their friends drew a magnificent mustache on their face with loving, artistic care. Sheldon looked at the glowing blue glass again. His mission was observation, understanding. How could he possibly understand something he hadn't experienced? He was a scientist. This was an experiment. He was the subject.
My death, he said carefully, will significantly impact the quality of my research.
If you die,
Ward countered, his voice soft,
at least you'll have lived first. Some people lack that privilege.
The course of action was profoundly illogical, which Sheldon began to understand with startling clarity, might be the entire point. He drank. The first sensation was a profound sense of gravitational confusion. The planet, it felt, suddenly decided its rotational pull was merely a suggestion. His internal chronometer, a biological constant for every Axran, stuttered. Time stretched and compressed like faulty code.
Oh,
he said, his voice a strange, resonant echo from his suit's speaker.
The local physics appear to be failing.
Ward, several drinks deeper into the evening, laughed so hard he nearly fell off his bar stool.
Nah, Doc, that's just your big logical brain finally realizing it lacks full control. What else you got?
Sheldon looked at the bar lights. They fractured. The visible light spectrum splintered into component parts and then reassembled into hues for which his species had no names, colors his optical sensors weren't designed to perceive.
I see new data,
he reported, fascinated.
The universe is more colorful than our charts suggest.
Welcome to being human, Doc,
Ward said and clapped him on the back.
We ignore the charts daily.
The night became a fluid tumble of moments. Each one bled into the next with the strange, impeccable logic of a dream. Sheldon found himself embroiled in conversations that started with xenobiology and somehow ended in passionate, table-pounding debates about whether a hot dog qualified as a sandwich. He watched, fascinated, as Ward attempted to teach a group of burly Marines an Axran meditative breathing technique. When performed drunk, The technique resembled uncoordinated, expressive flailing with occasional accidental tackling. At some point, they ended up on the beach outside the bar. The ocean whispered against the shore, a steady rhythmic counterpoint to the chaos behind them. The stars wheeled overhead, familiar constellations made strange and new by Earth's atmosphere and axial tilt. Other humans dotted the shoreline like glowing tide pools, their small groups alight with laughter and liquor.
You know what's funny? Ward said as he lay on his back in the cool sand and stared up at the Milky Way. Your people spent all that time, all that money to make the perfect poison. Tested it, refined it, made sure it would kill us in exactly the right, horrifying way.
4 decades of dedicated development,
Sheldon agreed, his words slightly slurred, but his memory of facts intact.
a budget equivalent to the gross domestic product of a small star system.
And we just,
Ward gestured vaguely at the entire planet.
we just metabolized it into a planetary bender. That's got a sting, right? Right in the old pride ganglia.
Sheldon considered this, his people's greatest scientific achievement, their ultimate weapon, undone by the stubborn, overachieving livers of a species of chaotic primates. Absurd, biochemically paradoxical. He realized with a sudden shocking clarity, absolutely hilarious. He laughed. The sound that escaped him was raw and convulsive, entirely unlike the polite, acoustic gestures of amusement his people used in diplomatic functions. It came from somewhere deeper than thought, bubbling up like a spring through solid rock and shaking his whole frame.
Your entire species,
He gasped between fits of laughter.
is biologically ridiculous.
Thank you,
Ward said, his voice brimming with pride.
we work very hard at it. Ow!
He attempted a formal bow while he lay down and mostly just succeeded in a face full of sand. They laughed even harder, 2 beings from opposite ends of a war, united by the sheer absurdity of it all. Around them, the night sang with human voices. Each one carried its own unique burden of joy and grief, and a stubborn refusal to let either one win the day.
Can I tell you something?
Ward said eventually when their laughter subsided into weary chuckles. His voice was quiet and raw.
About Harper.
Sheldon nodded. He felt his own voice would remain unsteady.
He was supposed to be on leave when the first wave hit, his sister's wedding. But he heard the rumors about your fleet massing at the edge of the system, and he came back early. He could have stayed home, been safe. But he said,
Ward's voice cracked, a sound like breaking glass.
he said, can't let you idiots have all the fun.
He sounds like he was a good friend,
Sheldon said softly.
The best, the stupidest, bravest bastard I ever knew.
Ward wiped his eyes with the back of a sandy hand.
I keep thinking if I drink enough of this stuff it'll stop hurting. But it fails to. It just makes it hurt different. Softer, maybe. Like the edges are less sharp for a little while.
In my culture,
Sheldon said slowly, and tested each unfamiliar emotional word before he said it.
we have a saying. Pain acknowledged is pain controlled.
Yeah, we have one too, Ward countered. This too shall pass. That means it still sucks absolute arse while it happens, though.
They sat in comfortable silence for a long time after that, 2 beings from different worlds who shared the universal experience of loss under the vast, silent gaze of the cosmos, the ocean's eternal rhythm a comfort. The night wore on, measured in empty canisters and shared stories, and the slow, inexorable recession of the tide. Sheldon found himself contributing his own tales, sanitized for security, of course, but true in the ways that mattered. He spoke of a childhood he spent as he memorized star charts while he secretly dreamed of the unknown spaces between them. He described a culture that traded wonder for output and spent the last 1,000 years and wondered why they felt so empty inside. Other humans drifted in and out of their orbit on the beach.
A nurse who was on shift for 36 hours straight and was now held together by VX9, caffeine, and sheer force of will. A teenager who lost his parents in the initial bombing but found a new, fiercely protective family in the chaos. A grandmother who outlived 2 invasions and 3 husbands and declared she wasn't about to let some purple space fascists with a stick up their collective cloaca ruin her perfect record. Each story was a thread in something larger, a vast, messy account of human experience that defied classification or easy understanding. They drank to the dead and to the living. They drank to small victories and catastrophic defeats. They drank to the overwhelming absurdity of existence and the stubborn, irrational beauty of continuing to exist anyway.
You know what the real joke is? Ward said. Your people think you're the advanced ones, the logical ones, but you've never figured out the real secret to surviving.
Which is?
Sheldon asked, his mind foggy but somehow clearer than it had ever been. That falling apart is just another way of coming together. You break a little, you heal a little stronger, like bones, or hearts, or whatever the hell passes for civilization these days. Sheldon thought about this, about the rigid, unyielding structure of Axran society, where any crack was seen as a catastrophic failure.
That is illogical.
Fuck logic, Ward said cheerfully and pushed himself to a sitting position. Logic would have had us go extinct back when we were still eaten by saber-toothed cats. We're still here because we're too stupid to know when we're beaten and too stubborn to care. Sheldon wondered how much farther along his own species would be if they cared less about logic. These confounding thoughts lulled him to a deep sleep, the ocean whispering many illogical comforts in his ear. The morning sun roused Sheldon from his slumber. He looked for Ward, who was absent. Sheldon's head whirred with vertigo, hung over from the drink, the poison. The sunlight blinded him. He felt dizzy, sand coated the cracks and folds of his body. But he felt something was very wrong. Where was Ward? Sheldon looked to a cliff that overlooked the sea. He saw a tiny, faint silhouette against the clouds. Ward. It had to be. Stumbling to his sore feet, he started for the figure. Ward stood at the very edge against the brilliant morning light. His flask was gone. He was completely sober for the first time in what felt like an eternity, and he shook with it.
Ward?
Sheldon asked.
Why are you up here?
I have to stop, he said, his voice raw and hollow, scraped clean of all the humor that usually armored it. The drinking, the laughing, the pretense that everything's fine when it's all just noise. White noise to drown out the real sound.
What sound?
Sheldon asked, though he already knew the answer. The silence, Ward whispered. The silence where Harper's voice should be, where all their voices should be. His shoulders shook with a silent, racking sob. I drink so I can avoid how quiet it really is.
Ward, why don't you come away from the ledge?
No! Ward screamed. He flung his arms out wide and spun in a circle. So fucking what if a gust of wind pushes me over? Maybe it's best to make it all stop. Sheldon approached slowly, cautiously. His time among these humans taught him that sudden movements around raw emotion were like sudden movements around a wounded animal, likely to cause more harm than help. Sheldon tried to be reasonable.
The cessation of the ethanol metabolites creates a significant biochemical imbalance, which leads to heightened anxiety and depression,
he said, and fell back on the comfortable language of science when emotional words failed him.
A natural physiological response.
Just call it a hangover, Doc. Ward let out a bitter, broken laugh that held no warmth. Though this one feels like it's been months, since long before your people even showed up. You just gave me a better excuse to stay numb. The wind picked up and whipped around the cliff face. It carried the smell of salt and the distant sounds of reconstruction. The humans were already working on rebuilding. Even poisoned, even grieving, they built. It was in their nature. He would disapprove, Ward continued, his voice thick with unshed tears.
Harper. He'd probably quote some old dead philosopher at me. Marcus Aurelius or some shit. Ugh. He'd tell me that choosing to feel nothing is just another kind of death.
He sounds wise.
He was 23. Ward's voice broke completely. He was a 23-year-old kid, and he died and thought he saved the world. And maybe he did. Maybe if he held that position, if he drew their fire. He took another step, closer to the edge. Small stones his boot dislodged tumbled into the emptiness below, their fall too long and too far for the landing to ever be heard. A chill spread through Sheldon's core, sharp as the drop to the rocks below. His mission was observation, documentation. The prime directive of any scientific study was non-intervention. Yet Ward had ceased to be just a subject. He was a friend.
You are right, Sheldon said. The pain is still there when you sober up.
Ward turned slightly, just enough for Sheldon to see his red-rimmed, haunted eyes.
Thanks for the prep talk, Doc. Real helpful.
I have more to say.
Sheldon moved closer, his steps careful and deliberate on the uneven rock. He found himself unafraid of falling. His only concern was his friend.
The pain remains, but so does everything else.
So what?
Ward shot back, his voice thick with anguish.
So the silence where Harper should be is real and vast, but it is one sound among many, the voices of those who continue to exist, who continue to fight and build and sing despite everything designed to stop them, are also real.
Sheldon was close enough now to reach out, but he refrained.
You cannot fill his absence with poison, but perhaps...
What? Fill it in with what?
Sheldon thought of his time of human observation, of laughter that was half a sob and tears that were half a celebration, of a species that looked at death and decided to throw a party, because they understood mortality with a terrifying, intimate clarity.
You fill it with you,
he said finally, the words truer than any scientific formula he had ever known.
The part of you that remains, the part that survives as a tribute to him instead of a betrayal. You survive because he would want you to, even if that survival feels beyond you.
Ward stared at him, his chest heaving. The wind howled between them and carried the echoes of 100 drunken conversations about loss and liquor and the liminal space between living and just dying.
That's enough,
Ward whispered in his infinite youth, the wind almost stealing the words.
It is,
Sheldon agreed immediately.
It will never be enough to replace what was lost. That is the point. Grief does not go away, but your life will grow around the wound, like a scar.
A sound escaped Ward's throat, a strangled thing that was more exhale than laugh.
That's a pretty speech, Doc. You practice that in front of a mirror?
Actually, I still experience the residual effects of the VX9. Your species' toxins have a significant half-life in axon physiology.
That got a real laugh out of him. Small and wet and broken, but genuine.
You're drunk counseling me.
Is it effective?
Ward looked back at the edge, at the drop, at the choice between falling and flying, which were really the same thing until you decided your direction. The battered metal flask he clutched fell from his numb fingers. It tumbled through empty space and caught the morning sunlight like a falling star before it vanished into the churning waves below.
Hop always said I was too damn stubborn to die properly, he said quietly.
That assessment seems accurate.
Asshole!
But Ward stepped back from the edge. One step, then another. Enough.
He'd have liked you, you know. He would have talked your ear off about xenopsychology. Probably would have gotten you drunk on purpose just to see what happened.
I believe the technical term for that is for science.
For science, Ward agreed.
He cried freely now, openly, but he was standing. He swayed on his feet, but he stood.
God, it hurts so much.
Yes,
Sheldon said.
It does.
Does it improve?
Sheldon considered lying. The human thing to do would be to offer a comforting falsehood, but Ward needed truth, not lies.
I have no knowledge of that, he said honestly. But I know you will survive it, with or without poison, because that is what you do.
Ward suddenly pulled him into a hug. Awkward and clumsy, their height differential was considerable, and Sheldon had too many joints that bent in the wrong directions. Perfect.
Thanks, Doc,
Ward mumbled into Sheldon's shoulder.
for being a terrible scientific observer and a pretty okay friend.
The pleasure was mine,
Sheldon replied.
I think.
They stood there as the sun climbed higher into the sky, two beings from warring species who had no business understanding each other, yet understood each other perfectly. That night, Sheldon sat in his appropriated, slightly less bombed-out motel room and hunched over his datapad. His official report was due. High Director Salvatore expected a detailed analysis of human biological vulnerabilities, recommendations for revised chemical weapons, and new strategies to complete the genocide his people initiated. Sheldon began his official report.
You asked me how to destroy them. I cannot. Humans are already self-destructive, and yet, paradoxically, indestructible. They drink death and call it living. They poison themselves, and from it draw connection, forgiveness, and hope. They metabolize death, sorrow, and chaos into meaning. They drink poison and find friendship at the bottom of the glass.
He pauses, then sighs. His gaze drifts toward the window where Ward sits on the motel steps, staring at the sunrise with a quiet steadiness that no substance could fake. Sheldon continues, softly, almost reverently.
If there exists a way to kill humanity, I no longer wish to find it.
He finishes the message, then stops, and deletes it. After a moment of silence, he begins again. This time, his tone is cold, clinical, calculated. This time, he fabricated evidence. He pulled up public domain footage of a pre-invasion human riot, a chaotic clash over a sports victory, and set to his work. With careful skill, he overlaid fake atmospheric sensor readings that indicated high concentrations of VX9 metabolites. He subtly altered the video's color saturation and gave the brawling humans a feverish, unnatural pallor. He tagged the file VX9-induced hyper-aggression state, case study 01. He found another clip, this one of a bar fight, and used it to create a second file. He edited the audio to sound more monstrous. Then he composed his report and crafted each word to prey on Salvatore's well-known political paranoia.
Emergency report to Axon High Command. Activate Emergency Directive 9. This is a Class 1 threat assessment. The VX9 distribution has resulted in an unexpected and catastrophic mutation within the human population. The subjects have integrated the compound into their base physiology. Subsequent exposure now results in the following enhancements: heightened aggression and pack-based tactical thinking, enhanced group coordination and morale, complete psychological imperviousness to fear and intimidation tactics. It induces a berserker state combat effectiveness that defies all previous models. See attached video evidence. Revised casualty projections. 90% of our current invasion force will be lost within 30 rotations should engagement continue. The humans appear to intentionally spread the compound among their ranks. They call this ritual sharing drinks, a form of tactical contamination to create more of these super soldiers. Most critical, Your Eminence, this mutation is a biological weapon in itself. If your political rivals on the Council, specifically Director Zorgel's faction, were to capture a human subject and replicate this process, they would have an unstoppable army of shock troops. Your position and the stability you have fought to maintain would become untenable. Immediate and sole recommendation: full and immediate withdrawal of all Axeran forces from the Sol system. Enact a full quarantine of this entire sector. All further contact should be suspended under any circumstances. Personal addendum: I am compromised. All attempts at extraction or rescue are ill-advised. The humans have a saying, when faced with the inevitable, become the inevitable. This appears to be less a philosophy and more of a biological imperative of the contamination. I will remain to continue observation from a safe distance. I am lost to you. Repeat, I am lost to you. Khan out.
He sent the message, a package of lies wrapped in a core of truth, with the absolute certainty that Salvatore would believe every terrifying word. Faced with a choice between military failure and political annihilation, the High Director would choose self-preservation every time. Sheldon powered down the datapad and stepped outside into the cool night air. Ward looked up from his card game with a group of war orphans.
Finish your homework, Doc?
I have sent my final report, Sheldon said. I informed them that you are all contagious with a terminal case of aggressive joy and that they should run for their lives before they catch it.
Ward grinned, a wide, easy expression.
Oh, we're infectious, are we?
Absolutely, Sheldon confirmed. I have been here for 4 days, and I have already learned 3 of your drinking songs and the basic rules of a game called poker.
You're terrible at poker,
the teenage boy piped up, his eyes on his cards.
I am excellent at the statistical probabilities of poker, Sheldon corrected. I am simply terrible at the art of bluffing. Apparently, the capillaries near my nasal passage dilate when I convey a falsehood.
Sounds like an easy game to me.
Ward expertly shuffled the worn deck of cards and dealt him in.
So what now, Doc? Are they coming back for you?
No, I told them not to.
Oh, aren't you tired of us yet?
Ward asked, a twinkle in his eye. Sheldon smiled at his friend.
Don't push it.
Ward laughed, a deep, genuine sound that made him miss his deal. The children around him laughed too, because his joy was infectious, their understanding of the joke irrelevant.
Well,
he said when he finally caught his breath,
guess you're stuck with us then. I trust you like terrible music and even worse decisions.
Sheldon picked up his cards.
I am, he said, developing a taste for both.
God help you, Doc. God help us all.
They played cards long into the night, their laughter mixed with the distant rhythm of hammers that rebuilt a broken world. Around them, humanity continued its ancient, chaotic dance of destruction and creation, of falling down and rising again, of poisoning themselves and somehow calling it living. And somewhere out in the cold, silent dark between the stars, an Axren fleet ran from the most terrifying weapon in the known universe, a species that refused to die properly, and the strange, unshakable loyalty they inspired in those who watched them. Months later, the bar was still called the Lost Drop, though someone had neatly crossed out Lost and painted Next above it in bright yellow. Then someone else had crossed out Next and scrawled Current underneath. The philosophical debate, it seemed, was still in progress. Sheldon stood behind the bar and polished a glass. He moved with a quiet confidence, a scientist who found his true calling in the most unlikely of laboratories. He'd gotten good at mixing drinks and understood the delicate, volatile chemistry of emotion and memory.
Yo, Doc!
A familiar voice called from the doorway and cut through the low hum of conversation.
Pour me the usual, and make it a double. I've got news.
Civilian E. Ward looked good. He looked healthy. The haunted look in his eyes had given way to a steady calm. He kept his sobriety, mostly. He allowed himself a drink on special occasions and Memorial Days, but the drowning was over. He learned how to swim instead.
What is the news?
Sheldon asked, and already reached for the ingredients for Ward's signature drink. Spicy ginger beer with a splash of non-alcoholic, purple-hued carbonated beverage he invented himself. It gave the drink a nice fizz.
Remember that support group I organized? The one for people who try to get clean after the whole poison into partying thing.
The one you inappropriately named Apocalypse Anonymous.
That's the one, Ward said with a proud grin. We just got our 100th member, and
he pulled out a datapad and slid it onto the bar.
The new planetary university wants to fund us as an official study. Turns out when you survive an alien neurotoxin by getting drunk on it for a month, you create some pretty interesting psychological case studies.
Imagine that.
Sheldon said dryly and slid the foamless drink across the bar.
And how is the other project?
The memorial? It's good. We finally laid the foundation yesterday.
Ward's smile softened and lost its cocky edge.
It's gonna be beautiful, Doc. A place to remember everyone we lost. And maybe...
He unconsciously touched the small metal disc he wore on a chain around his neck. His 6-month sobriety chip. One he had had custom-made from a salvaged piece of the Vigilant Harmony's hull plating.
a place to remember who we choose to be now that it's over.
They clinked glasses, Ward's fizzy ginger beer and Sheldon's simple glass of water. He discovered he quite liked being clear-headed among the beautiful chaos. Someone had to keep an accurate count of who owed whom drinks.
Any word from home?
Ward asked carefully. They talked about it infrequently, but he knew Sheldon still monitored the long-range frequencies, just in case.
Nothing. As far as the Axon Imperium is concerned, I am either dead or contaminated beyond all reclamation.
And which one are you?
Sheldon considered the question, his gaze a sweep of the noisy, welcoming bar. It was filled with its usual mix of soldiers and civilians, humans and the occasional other stranded alien who decided Earth's particular brand of madness was worth staying for.
Both,
he said finally.
The Dr. Sheldon Khan who left the Vigilant Harmony is dead, but something new seems to have taken his place.
Yeah, what's that?
Sheldon smiled, the expression now easy, natural on his mauve face.
A bartender, a friend, and someone who understands that the most profound changes often come from the strangest chemistry.
Like poison?
Ward asked.
Like poison,
Sheldon confirmed.
And the people who teach you how to survive it.
Ward raised his glass high.
To weird-ass chemistry, then.
Sheldon raised his own.
And to those who refuse to follow the formula.
They drank. Around them, humanity continued its eternal, glorious, messy dance. And in a small bar at the end of the world, a human and an alien served drinks to the survivors who learned that sometimes all you needed was a change in perspective. Outside, the stars wheeled on, vast and indifferent to the small miracles below. But on Earth, among a species that had looked extinction square in the eye and asked if it wanted to do shots, the miracles continued. One drink, one day, one stubborn refusal at a time. Because that's what humans did. They survived.